Good morning, everybody. My name is Ruth Servan-Smith. Welcome to the Lunch Break Live. It is with the Education Lab team today instead of Ivana, your regular host. I am the education editor of the Education Lab. My team covers statewide issues in schools around the state. This week, we published a series of stories about what we are calling high flyers. These are schools that met certain benchmarks for success, and they are beating the odds and helping more students succeed. So you can see the whole list of 43 schools on AL.com in the Education Lab Stories tab. With me today is the reporter for that series, Trisha Powell Crane. We also have two educators who are involved with districts that we profiled. Pam Fortenberry, who is Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction in Opelika Schools. Principal Josh Weatherly, who leads Gwynn Elementary in Marion County. And then we also have Karen Chenoweth, who is a researcher with the Education Trust, who has been looking at ways that high poverty schools succeed around the country for years. We're going to have a short conversation today about ways all of us in Alabama can help more schools succeed. Feel free to drop a question in the comments and we will try to get to it. But other than that, we're just going to hear from these educators and experts about their work and ways that more of us can be involved in helping schools succeed. To kick us off, can everybody just introduce themselves and talk a little bit about your current work and research? Why don't we start with Pam?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Pam Fortenberry. I'm the Assistant Superintendent over Curriculum for the Opelika City Schools. This is my first year as the Assistant Superintendent. My last 9 years, I was the principal of West Forest Intermediate School. I have been our local Region 9 class president a couple of times and have served on the AAESA board for the last 4 years. I have tried to stay involved with class and the AAESA of Alabama.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Josh.
Yes, I'm Josh Weatherly. I'm principal at Gwynn Elementary School. This is my 9th year of being principal here. I was a teacher here before that for 10 years and worked for three other administrators prior to taking this job. So just happy to be on with you guys.
Thank you. And Karen?
I'm Karen Chenoweth. I am writer in residence at the Education Trust, which is a national advocacy organization that works to improve the academic achievement of all children, but particularly children of color and children from low-income backgrounds.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Trish, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to do this High Flyers project and what you learned?
Well, first I have to thank the Education Writers Association because they funded this work with a grant. I pitched it and they said, okay. But I really wanted to look at Alabama's High Flyers kind of in the vein of Karen's work. She's looked at High Flyers nationwide. So I want all kids to get an excellent education. That's why I do this. And I wanted people to see people in Alabama working in Alabama schools, that it can be done, that kids in high poverty schools can learn at high levels. So I found these folks, 43 of them, and I just thought we got to go figure out what they're doing. What is the recipe? And it's not easy. It's not like I can put it in a cookbook. So I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go along.
Well, and we should say too, Trish, you weren't necessarily trying to find the best schools in the state in like a U.S. News and World Report way. You weren't trying to find the schools that everybody normally talks about. We think those people get some well-deserved attention already, and we wanted to bring some attention to other schools who are also doing great work.
Exactly.
Karen, you have built a career studying schools that have beat the odds. You've been to several Alabama schools, in fact, in Mobile. How did you get into that research, and why do you think it's important to identify what we call high flyer schools, what you call schools that are high success?
So I was trained as a reporter. I was a local reporter, and I was hired in 2004 by the Education Trust to find the schools that were doing what it said it wanted schools to do, which is teach children of color and children from low income backgrounds to high levels. And they knew that they existed, but like, where were they? What were they doing? That question really was still an open question at that point. The only kind of examples anybody could ever come up with were some charter schools and a few private schools. So we wanted to focus on neighborhood schools that did not have entrance requirements or any kind of barriers to students and their families. Not because you can't learn from other kinds of schools, but because we wanted to demonstrate this work can be done within ordinary context of school districts and schools and school districts.
Great. Pam, can you tell us a little bit more about your background in education and your work as a principal before you joined central office staff?
Yes, I've been a teacher. I've been an assistant principal. I've been a principal and now assistant superintendent over curriculum. That's my background. And it is hard work. And Trish, thank you for coming out and highlighting what we do, because teachers work hard every day. And so I appreciate you coming out and highlighting that work.
Principal Weatherly, you mentioned that you've been with Gwen for a number of years. Can you tell us what made you interested in stepping into the principal's role, and what changes you made when you had that responsibility, and maybe more opportunities to make broad changes at your school?
Well, when I first got into education, it was a little bit of a struggle. A lot of things, unfortunately, in education have to do with political things. And for a while, when I started, it seemed like that was the route things were kind of going. I did some leaves and everything, and then I had a lady that wanted to hire me, and it was a split day the first year that I taught between a school named Brilliant and then our school. And pretty quick after the next year, they moved me to full-time here at Ewan Elementary School. And the principal then kind of identified me as, one of those leader types. And so she really worked with me, and I was able to do a lot of administrative things. And then the next, I'd actually, when she left, I did put in for the job. Didn't receive it at the time. Maybe that was a blessing. I don't know. I got to see a little more things than maybe I wouldn't have seen. So the next principal that came in also identified me kind of as that type of person. So I was able to kind of straddle the fence as a teacher and as an admin, which was a little difficult because you had those conversations with an admin and then you had those with the teachers. But the teachers always knew then that I would go to bat for them. So when it would, when conversations would come, I could be honest with the principal, I could be honest with the teachers. And then I think that did help me. I saw things that I thought we could tweak and do better. And so far, so good. I think things have worked out pretty well. So and I said we had a presentation in Orlando last week. And one of the things I want to emphasize is if we always stay kids first, we're going to be okay. But it's when we start looking at those other things that, the political stuff, the whatever, that's when we kind of get a little off track. So as long as kids are first, we're in good shape. So hopefully that answered kind of what you're looking for.
Let me ask about one of the interventions we found at some of these high succeeding schools. And just a reminder, if anybody has any questions about these interventions or different programs at schools and how they work, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to them if we can. But Pam, one of the interventions Trish focused on in Opelika schools was this idea of teacher coaching,
right?
Doing professional development as a team, not just among individual staff. Can you tell us a little bit more about Opelika's coaching model and why you think it's effective?
Yes, I'd love to. It boils down to leadership, planning, and coaching. It makes all the difference. Dr. Neighbors, our superintendent, 5 or 6 years ago, he hired reading and math coaches, district reading and math coaches. These are seasoned teachers, master teachers in the field of reading and math. The district coaches work with our school coaches for half a day every week to prepare them to work with teachers each week during their grade level common planning time to prepare lessons, to help the teachers prepare those lessons. The school coaches then turn around this PD to the teachers so they can stay updated on quality instruction. Also, special ed and EL teachers are invited to the weekly meetings. Some lesson planning, data sharing, course of study, PD, and other curriculum items take place during this 80 minutes. Again, that's 80 minutes of weekly meetings. The school coaches usually lead these meetings, but the district coaches help out when needed. School coaches follow up with support through walkthroughs and coaching cycles to support teachers. Each week, this process starts all over again, and conversations are shared with the district administrators, myself, the superintendent, the elementary person, and coaches, principals, and other teachers. In other words, everyone is in the loop of what the expectations are for the system. So that's pretty much what goes on.
Thank you. It seems like there's an interest in making sure that teachers aren't isolated in their classrooms, but are all working together. Is that correct?
We pretty much took away the isolation. We pretty much stay on the same page.
Awesome. Karen, let me ask you about the importance of data. As you said, when you started your research, we were really kind of starting to get a lot more detailed data about how individual schools were doing, such that you could compare in a way that you hadn't before. But using data well and doing it effectively can look very different in different schools. What are some things you found in schools you've studied? And also, let's talk about testing. What role should tests play in school improvement?
So data is a word that can be really scary to some teachers, especially if they're not used to the kind of meetings that Pam just talked about, which is, so vital. They kind of sometimes think it's an attempt to ignore students' humanity and individuality, but really what it is, the folks I've written about, they don't see it that way. They see data as a way of gaining perspective and seeing patterns, and thereby being able to expose and share expertise. So, if they, they can look at data and go, well, I thought I taught that, but it seems like this student, these students or this group of students didn't learn it. So now your students learned it. What did you do? So it allows that, what I call the most powerful question in education, to be asked, which is, your kids are doing better than mine. What are you doing? But to get to that level requires looking at shared information in a common format. That's data. That's all that data is. It's, yes, sometimes it's only numbers, but sometimes it can be other things as well. The use of tests is highly important. First of all, good tests are a way of actually solidifying learning. It's a part of a learning process. Second of all, it allows teachers and principals and superintendents to actually get a bead on what's going on in what is otherwise black boxes of classrooms. Teachers may think, they may actually know, like which student needs help and which student doesn't need help, but they may have an idea, but they actually, seeing the test score numbers actually helps. There are a lot of different kinds of tests. There's formative tests. Your audience is mostly an educator audience. Formative tests, summative tests. Summative tests are good to keep the big picture in mind. They're not really good to guide day-to-day instruction. But after a year, you can go, wow, our kids really aren't very good in measurement, which is a very common problem in American schools, by the way. Like, maybe we need to add a week or two of instruction and measurement. It's that kind, so the state assessments can be very useful for that. Whereas it's the formative assessments that teachers use all the time to really help guide instruction and expose that classroom expertise. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. And let me just answer a reader question, then I think Trish will take the next one. But it looks like I took off the speaker boxes of people's names accidentally on the broadcast. So my apologies to viewers. I'll just remind you, like a public radio announcer, my name is Ruth Servin. I'm the education editor. With us, we have two educators, Pam Fortenberry and Josh Weatherly of Gwynn and Opelika Schools. Trish Crane is the reporter for our High Flyer series. And Karen Chenoweth is a researcher and writer at residence with Education Trust. So, Trish.
Sure. So, one of the things that was hard about this series is we can talk about data and we can talk about teacher coaching, but there's this big thing about culture, right? That, it's hard to write about. Everybody was smiling, when you walk in, everybody seemed comfortable sort of thing. So, and I know, Mr. Weatherly, I really picked your brain yesterday about this to sort of try to flesh this out more. But, Pam, one of the things that, y'all are really working hard to support teachers, right? I mean, and that is sort of where the rubber meets the road. That's where High Flyer said, it's in the classroom where learning happens. But then there are all these other things that you do to support teachers. And there's also one thing I found at the High Flyers was everybody believes that all children can learn, and that poverty, while it can present some barriers, it doesn't have to interfere with learning. And that was remarkable, to hear on the ground, because I've read it in Karen's work. This is the belief at these high performing schools. How do you instill that belief in people? Because it's we in Alabama, we've had a lot of kids are in poverty and it's really hard to teach them. I hear that a lot. But these High Flyer schools were showing something different. How do you get teachers and administrators on board with that?
I think it's a community thing. It's a leadership. It's a belief that we have. I'm just going to tell you what our mission statement is: educate every child every day. We believe in all of our students. We want them to read on grade level, do math at the highest level. That's every single one of them. Participate and enjoy the arts. We're big in the arts. Be aware of and be offered opportunities in different careers. We want our students to be prepared to make good choices, have good choices to be made. It's a community. Our school board, parents, teachers, mayor, city council, local businesses, our churches, they're supportive of our school system and show their support in so many ways. All these people believe in us, and we know it. It's a feeling of pride, and when you're supported, it just comes out in your schools every day. So,
yeah, I can see that. I saw that very clearly. And even though the support looked a little different among I visited 5. There are 43 High Flyers. I was able to make it to 5 schools, but that feeling of support, Mr. Weatherly, I know you felt it too. That was really remarkable. So, Ruth, I don't know if you want to take the next one. You want me to?
Oh, why don't you?
Okay. So we did have a little list of questions that we wanted to get through. So, Mr. Weatherly, you don't have, y'all are a small school. Y'all don't have a lot of support staff. And it's really up to you and your teachers to get all of this done. But you did have a strong community around you. You pulled together a group of people that met with me, including a youth pastor and your mayor. How do you get that? How do you get that support going? Dr. Fortenberry just talked about like community support. How do you do that? Like, where does that come from?
Well, I think you've just got to really kind of take note of the people that are interested in your school. And so, early on, when you have the youth pastor that wants to come up and be a part of your school, that's a big thing. And then when you have community businesses that want to do the same thing. So I think it's just really identifying those people and using those people because they want to help and they want to see success. And And like she had mentioned earlier, once the ball gets rolling and the success starts coming, it's easier to ask people for help because this community takes a lot of pride in what's going on here. So when you label us as one of the high flyer schools, again, that's another feather in the hat. So now when I ask somebody to help us out, yeah, what do you need? What do you need? So and I go meet, we have an advisory board. I try to meet with them at least once a quarter. And then I go to a city council meeting and they'll ask me things once a quarter also. So everybody, including my teachers and community, know that I'm here, I'm available. I'll be at the meetings or whatever. So they feel comfortable coming to me and asking me, what can we do? And I feel comfortable asking them, what can you do for us? So it's just acknowledging those people that want to be a part of this.
That's great. That's great. And next question for Karen. Why, you've been looking at these schools. I mean, honestly, your work inspired what I did. Like that, I wanted to
Which is
grow up
thrilling for me.
Oh, well, it was a lot. But you were able to write a book. I need to write a book because I can't get it all into these articles. But what do you see, like, you've been doing this almost 20 years, right? You talk a lot about systems of support. You talk about, trying new things. Why do you think some schools are like better? Showing, let's put it this way, having more success with student outcomes on tests and achievement. Why do you think some schools are doing that better than others? Big question.
Well, they teach the kids. You heard Pam sort of lay out, they're not drilling and killing reading tests and math tests. They want kids to read. They want kids to do math. They're not endlessly having them do practice tests. I'm just going to guess. Am I right? Right. They're involved in the arts. They teach, I'm going to hope, science and social studies.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. They're teaching the kids. They're teaching the kids and you heard her talk about opening up opportunities for kids. The folks in these schools, and Pam and Josh both talk like, the people I've written about. They see schools as the engine of opening up opportunities for children, for their students. And they see their children, their students, as capable of taking those opportunities. And that belief is actually hugely important because this is difficult work. Like, don't ever think, oh, well, it's just easy. You just teach the kids. Teaching is really complex. It's a complex job. To take someone who doesn't know how to read and get them to know how to read is enormously complex. Louisa Moats, a reading researcher, wrote a book, Reading is Rocket Science, right? Like it's very complex. It's sort of astounding. We expect little kids to do this very complex task, but we do, and they need to, and it's possible, but you have to believe it's possible. And you have to have a real sense of what it is to be an educated person. You should know something about the world. You should be interacting with the world. You should know something about art and literature and music, and not be a narrowly focused person. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's been tough. Talking with Melissa Shields, who's she leads school improvement efforts at the State Department of Education. And we talk about this a lot. Like she's in all the schools. She's in high performing, low performing. So, she said they've had 1,000 support requests since July. They're a team of 8 people, counting her, for the entire state. So, kudos to her and her folks who really are on the ground doing the hard work. But I think what the hard part is, if you're in a school that you're not seeing a lot of success, and I mean, even before the pandemic, of course, like it needs its own show, right? But how, what can anybody really, this question, what do schools, like, how do you get started on this path of, does it take teachers? Does it take principals? Does it take superintendents? where does this, because in each of the high-flying schools I visited, there was a turning point. There was a moment where somebody said, we can do better. And I think, Mr. Weatherly, you actually said that to me. I thought our students could do better. And so, this ball got rolling, but where do folks start?
So I had, once you get to high flying status, you're doing so many things at that point. You have so many systems in place. You have so much going on that low performing schools just kind of go, I don't even know where to start. So I had the opportunity over the years to follow some of the principles that I had written about. So, very effective principles in very high flying schools, high flying by your standards. And they went into new schools, and I was able to watch that process. And that was really interesting because that was exactly the problem. And often the culture was the first thing they had to tackle. So for example, Deb Gustafson, first thing she did, well, this was before my time actually, but she was very clear about what she did. First thing she did was she told teachers that they would never be written up, i.e. disciplined or, anything, for anything except speaking disrespectfully to children or their parents. And the teachers were kind of taken aback and said, well, the kids are disrespectful to us. And she said, it's the adults who set the culture. So like culture is often the very first one. I saw Ruth kind of go.
I was just going to ask you to remind listeners where that school is.
Oh, that school is in Kansas. That was a Kansas school in Junction City, Kansas, on Fort Riley.
Thank you.
Yeah. So culture is hugely important. Often kids are disrespectful. In a disrespectful environment, kids will reflect that. And so in order to change that, you have to change the way teachers and school staff, school secretaries really can make or break a school culture. Wow. Often. They're enormously important. Terry Tomlinson at George Hall Elementary, she told me, she said, school secretaries can be your undertakers. Because they are the first people students and parents often see, and how they treat students and parents is enormously important. It's the face of the school. So culture is just really important. Treating every student as capable and as capable of learning, not just capable of behaving, but capable of learning. Mm-hmm. That kind of respect will build a respectful culture. Pam? Is that something you agree with, Pam and Josh? Did I say that right? Or
yeah, you did. I was just going to say, teachers, and it's true, and I do think you have to change the culture. And I think when you finally get that culture moving, that teachers are always moving students forward. Let's not forget this academically. We are always aware of, teachers are always aware of that state test, that national test. But teachers pick up students at whatever level that land in their classroom. But teachers do make growth every year with their students. I've seen the growth from Scantron to Ames Webb. To make them high flyers, I do think that culture, someone does have to come in there and really get them moving forward. But it might not show up on NAEP or ACAP, but students are making progress, and teachers are helping students and families in so many ways. Schools and school systems are continually looking at ways to improve their craft instruction to help students succeed. Alabama, with the help of the ARI, and we are implementing reading, intervention methods to help students through the science of reading. And you mentioned that. Tutoring, we're doing SHRIPs this year, portfolios. Hopefully these strategies will help support more students in being successful in schools. So I do think more of us are moving in the right direction. But I do know that schools they're moving students. So,
well, and I want to say that was the hard part for me, like emotionally. I thought, when you hold up about 43 schools and only 43 schools, right? It kind of like, it didn't feel great. But I do think that it's important to examine what these schools are doing. And it's just remarkable because, Tony Thacker Dr. Thacker started the Torchbearer program back in 2004. If you read the initial stuff, same things in place. Read any of Karen's books, listen to her Extraordinary Districts podcast. You hear the same ingredients, but it looks different. It is complex and it looks different in each community. But it's hard, and this has been a hard couple of years for teachers and schools also. So I'm thoroughly impressed with what I saw happening in Alabama schools.
Well, I see some good questions that I don't think, unfortunately, we'll really have time to dig into. Philip had a good question about some systems, bureaucracies presenting more obstacles to weak schools than others. That is a great question. That is a question we hope to explore in future reporting. If we talk more about accountability efforts and whether they work or don't work. I know there was a good question I got from a reader about COVID funding and if it can help other schools implement some of these good evidence-based practices. That is also something we hope to explore in future reporting. But let me just close us out with a question for the whole group. We've talked about various. Oh, did somebody? I think that's just feedback from me. Sorry. What's something you want listeners to take away? If they're thinking about big or small improvements for their local school, what would you hope people take back to their own communities, or something you think that they might be able to do at their school tomorrow?
I agree with these two ladies. I think that the number one thing you got to do is to set that culture right. And I've made the statement before, I can give certain teachers a cereal box and they're going to figure out how to teach. So when we hire the teachers, we need to hire teachers that are called to do this job, because it'll get done if we find the right people. So we just got to make sure that we're identifying those. And unfortunately, those that don't teach, we need to identify pretty quick and make sure that they're not going to mess a lot of kids up for a long period of time. So I just say, make sure you're hiring the right people, set that culture right. And, I don't know everything. And if somebody's doing it better, you got to be a leader that wants to learn. And there's teachers that have great ideas that I have to, I met with some this morning that they have great ideas. I'll listen to those ideas. And if they match what we're trying to do, that's okay.
I would say support your teachers, send them a nice note. They're working really hard. There's some great people, great teachers out there. Send them a note. If you have an hour in your week to volunteer, go to your local school, volunteer. If you don't know where to start in the media center. They need help reshelving those books. So love on your local school, local school.
I would just say the expertise of how to improve schools exists within the field. You just heard from two educators who have expertise. They don't have every piece of knowledge that is needed every day for them. They need to be able to learn from others as well. But the expertise exists, and we need to support it. Not just teachers, but principals as well, and even superintendents who seem very remote. This is a very difficult time to be an educator, and we need to help them and give them the systems and resources, we as the public, to be able to do their job. And thank you for all that you do for kids.
Yes, thank you both. And thanks to, one of the things that was really encouraging about this project, I thought, oh, it's COVID. This got delayed for a while before I could get started because Delta came. When school started, I thought, well, I can get back into school. And everyone was so gracious with their time. They were really excited to share what they were doing. And I know, and many of them talked about how they went and visited a school that they saw as a high flyer, and they learned from them. So I see this sharing community and this real willingness to learn from each other and to share what's working with each other. Plus, I'm going to put a pitch in for the school improvement folks at the State Department. Dr. Shields may her folks are available, right, to help, to get started, to coach about how to learn to use data, to talk about instructional coaches. They're out there and they really want to help. So there are resources if you need help. And everybody wants children to learn. I don't know a single teacher that doesn't want kids to learn, right? So I just think there are a lot of things we can learn from each other.
Thank you. Well, thanks to you all. If you haven't read Trisha's High Flyers story yet, the link is in the chat. Make sure you read that, share it. If your school is on it, be proud of them. If your school is not on it and you want to talk more with a reporter about either issues or progress, reach out. We would love to hear from you. I should also just say one more time, this project was supported through a grant from the Education Writers Association. My team is grant and donor supported, so there is also a link in the chat if you are an individual who wants to support that work financially. That donations don't influence our work. We're nonpartisan, but we appreciate them when we receive them.
And I want to pitch, we have one more story coming in the series that will talk about culture. And that hopefully will be out in the next few days.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone who tuned in today. You can find our stories online at AL.com, and we hope to hear from readers soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.